Hi guys, welcome back. This is Eric Lowe from Swordwind Historical Swordsmanship. In a previous video, I shared an interpretation of Marozzo's abattimento for the unaccompanied sword. And in today's video, we're going to begin breaking down what those movements are and why. Like a lot of modern Bolognese fencers, and I'm happy to credit Ilkka Hartikainen for this insight, I break Marozzo's form down into three parts. This is not actually the way that Marozzo himself breaks it down. He breaks it down into 7, and we'll get a little bit into the interpretive implications for that later in this video. For now, we're going to start off with ourselves in Coda Lunga Stretta, and Marozzo asks us to extend our sword hand strongly towards the enemy. Now that does not mean we're going to hold the sword straight out like this, because Coda Lunga Stretta is never illustrated, including in Marozzo's own book, held this high. But we are also not going to be holding our sword hand very far back towards the hip this way, as is sometimes done. Instead, because he tells us to extend the hand strongly towards the enemy, we're going to have it kind of forward and down as I'm doing here. Our first motion is a falso tondo to the opponent's face. So I sort of hook this, make this right hooking motion, and then we're told to deliver a mandrito fendente to the face while extending the right foot. For most people, what feels most natural initially is this sort of around the world cut, like that. But you'll notice that what really feels natural there is a mandrito squalembrato, that is to say a descending diagonal cut, which is not what Marozzo calls for. In addition, because this is a cut towards the face, I have to assume that my opponent is going to parry, so I have another sword coming this way. I'm not going to be able to blast through that and make this cut. So instead what I'm doing is throwing my tondo and then dropping my sword to the outside, letting that parry go past, and then I step in with a steeper fendente. This is the sort of thing that Marozzo loves to do with redoubled cuts throughout his book, and I think it makes a lot more sense, even though it is mechanically more difficult in this case. We drop down into porta di ferro larga with our feet farther apart. Now, Marozzo says, if our opponent throws anything at all at us, we're set up in a position to defend ourselves with a falso manco. This falso manco, interestingly, is specifically to the opponent's sword hand, not to their sword. So I am throwing this to the sword hand, and then I do another set of redoubled fendenti, straight back down towards the face. Assuming that my opponent's sword is still functional, he'll move to parry that. I drop into what is essentially a tramazzone with this wrist action in order to avoid that parry, and then letting my left foot drive my right, as Marozzo says, I drop a second cut to his face. Still in porta di ferro larga. The next set of actions is another defense from porta di ferro larga, again with a falso manco. The opponent can throw anything at all at us, and we step out to the side with a big falso manco, this time hitting the sword, and then he says give the opponent a reverso squalembrato that goes from his head to his toes. Step out all the way and give this big wheeling reverso. To cover ourselves, he says, back out with the mandrito traversato to the sword arm. That is to say, I am dropping my sword in a way that it would cover my opponent's sword arm, and then reset into Coda Lunga Stretta with just a half turn of the hand. That is the first part of Marozzo's form as he published it in the book. So we've got a falso tondo to the face, a falso manco to the sword hand, and another falso manco, this time to the sword itself. The footwork there is relatively straightforward. We have an extension forward into a wide stance. We have let the left foot drive the right, and we have a simple passing step coming around the segno or fencing circle that Marozzo wants us always to imagine we're fencing on as I deflect my opponent's sword. The next chapter is much shorter, but it also deals with the use of the falso, and I suspect this is me interpretively speculating that Marozzo published this as a separate chapter because the footwork is now getting more complicated and frankly a little more Bolognese. The last section he gives us is another falso dritto, this time to the sword, and he says, step forward with your left foot. Now because I'm going to my opponent's sword and trying to knock that out of the way, I'm not going to step straight forward towards my opponent, because if I do that and my opponent deviates under my blade, then I'm going to be eating a thrust in the chest. Instead, again remembering that I'm supposed to be fencing on a circle here, I'm going to step forward along that circle. This way, I'm keeping the distance open between me and my opponent. If I hit his sword, great, I can proceed. If I don't hit his sword, then I have room to withdraw and cover myself rather than just stepping straight in. So, falso manco, stepping forward with the left, forward and around the circle. Then he says, cut them in the face with the reverso tondo, also stepping forward with the right. So again, I'm going to be stepping forward around my circle here rather than driving straight in. This is a fairly long range cut. Then I'm going to withdraw by throwing a reverso spalombrato as I cast my right foot back, and I end in coda longa alta. The fact that we end in coda longa alta, which is generally a guard that is more suited for long range fencing, is another indication that this whole motion is actually done at fairly long range. And this is where Marozzo starts the next next part of his form, which we'll pick up in a subsequent video. So we'll talk about this more in the context and commentary video I'll be posting in a little bit, but what we've got here is two uses of each falso. One that is intended to, or at least threaten to, wound the opponent, and one that goes to the opponent's sword. We've seen the falso dritto to the face, and we've seen the falso dritto to the sword. Both of those note are offensive, which is in accordance with kind of general Bolognese theory about the use of coda longa guards. We've also seen a falso manco to the hand, and we've seen a falso manco to the sword. Both of those are defensive in that they are in reaction to something that Marozzo says the opponent is throwing to us. Both of those, that defensive use of the Porta di Ferro guards is also in accordance with kind of general Bolognese theory about Porta di Ferro. So once again, the whole first section, which is to say the first two chapters of Marozzo's form, look like this. Throw the falso dritto to the face, goes to the parry, cut down to the face. Threaten the hand of something coming in, threaten the face, avoid the parry, hit the face. Hit the sword of something coming in, give them a reverso all the way down, cover their sword arm, reset. Hit the sword, hit the face, cover yourself, and you're ready for the next part of the form. I hope this was useful to you guys. We'll be breaking down the second and third parts of the form in subsequent videos, as well as giving a video that is just discussing the historical context and some kind of theoretical commentary on the fencing actions in this form. And We'll see you next video.